inflation, as we know, is the rise in the general price level of goods and services over time. It's crucial because it impacts purchasing power, living standards and economic stability. In Colombia, studying inflation is particularly relevant because of its heavy reliance on trades and key industries like oil and agriculture, which are sensitive to global price changes. Here, economy relies heavily on industry like oil, agriculture and mining. Oil, which accounts for a large share of export, ties the country's economic health to global energy market. A drop in oil prices often lead to a weaker peso, increasing the cost of imports and fueling inflation. Similarly, Colombia imports machinery, electronics and food products. Rising global prices for these goods directly impact inflation as businesses and consumers face higher costs. This dependency highlights the economic vulnerability to external factors. Currently, Colombia's inflation rate is around 11.74%, driven by rising food and energy prices. Economic reform and monetary policies by the central bank aim to curb inflation, but challenges remain.
The economic crisis in Colombia was happened mainly because of the global crisis. For example, the Russia-Ukraine war that happened in February 2022. Because of this war, the Western nation has imposed sanctions toward Russia by banning its own oil import, thus effectively caused a global energy shortage. Because of this, the energy price in Colombia has surged to their highest level in over a decade, thus causing the inflation crisis in Colombia. Other than that, there's also COVID-19 that happened in 2020 that caused the whole world, including Colombia, to be in total lockdown. This action ultimately caused the slow growth economy by reducing their economic activity. Because of this lockdown, Colombia cannot export or import any goods or product, thus leading to a shortage and higher price, especially when it comes to fuel consumption and food. Finally, we have natural disaster that happened in 2023 causing by La Nina phenomena. This phenomena has caused landslide and flood, especially toward agriculture sector. Because of this phenomena, there's been shortage of the staple food, for example, the rice, potato and grain. This shortage ultimately caused the higher price of goods, thus leading to an inflation crisis in Colombia.
So let's moving on to the policy used by Colombian government during the inflation crisis. The first policy is monetary policy, the second one is fiscal policy, and the last one is direct policy. Monetary policy in economic terms refers to the action taken by nation central bank to manage the money supply, interest rate, and overall liquidity in economy. The goal is to control the inflation, stabilize the currency, foster economic growth, and achieve full employment. As for the Colombian government, the Central Bank of Colombia took an aggressive approach by raising the interest rate for multiple times, following the high inflation caused by both international and domestic. This action showed the commitment from them to maintaining and controlling the inflation to be within the target levels. Moving on to fiscal policy. In economic terms, fiscal policy involves decisions by governments regarding the taxation and public spending to influence the economy. The primary objectives are to stabilize economic cycles, stimulate growth, reduce unemployment, and manage inflation. The Colombian government employs fiscal policy as a critical tool to manage inflation crisis, balance the economic stability, and to protect vulnerable populations. For example, targeted subsidies. This is to counteract the rising of cost living. The government provides subsidies for essential goods and services such as electricity, gas, and food. The aim to mitigate the impact of inflation on low-income households by keeping the basic needs affordable. Direct policy in economics refer to government action that directly influence specific economic variables or outcomes without relying on intermediaries. This policy typically involves direct intervention or regulation to achieve desired objective. During inflation crisis, the Colombian government has implemented maximum price controls on basic goods such as food staples, rice, beans, and cooking oil, utilities such as electricity, water, and other necessities.
Between 1992 and 1999, monetary policy was conducted on the basis of an intermediate monetary target and a crawling band for the exchange rate. The inflation target was used to compute the slope of the exchange rate band and the growth rate of the expected path for M1 on the monetary base. The first element of an inflation targeting strategy, besides the targets themselves, were introduced in 1995, where several models for forecasting inflation were developed and monthly internal inflation reports started to be produced. In December 1998, the inflation report began to be published quarterly. With time, the report acquired growing importance in the decision-making process of the board of directors. In September 1999, the currency was allowed to float following a significant real depreciation within the band system. Structural reform had already taken place, the current account deficit had been stabilized, and the financial system had been strengthened, and Colombia had entered a program with the IMF that aimed to correct structure. The authorities are firmly committed to reducing the CPS deficit to 2% of GDP in 2003 as planned. they proposed converting the indicative fiscal targets for June and September 2003 into performance criteria. The authorities emphasized their readiness to adopt additional measures if necessary to safeguard the fiscal position in 2003. If the referendum were unsuccessful or postponed to 2004, the government might need to reverse the spending increase of 2003, potentially widening the overall public sector deficit by 7.0% of GDP in 2003. In such case, the authorities plan to implement several offsetting measures, including bringing forward the VAT increase schedule for 2005, which is estimated to yield 0.3% of GDP annually, issuing a decree to extend the freeze on general government wages consistent with the 2001 ruling of the Constitutional Court, an action that could save 7.3% of GDP in spending, reducing subsidies on gasoline, diesel, and electricity, which current costs about approximately 0.5% of GDP annually, issuing long-term bonds on concessional terms as a financial option, targeting mainly domestic residents to support the government domestic security program. Colombia's government implemented direct subsidy policies to address socio-economic challenges and support its population during periods of economic strain. These policies focus on reducing the cost of essential goods and services, stabilizing key sectors, and mitigating the impact of inflation on low-income households. One of the subsidies that are implemented by the Colombia's government is the family subsidy system. It is the set of political and regulatory institutions aimed at the comprehensive protection of both the workers and their families, which exists in the economic burden on a worker from supporting a family. Next, the Colombia's government implement the subsidies policy with the current Colombian government, led by the President Gustavo Petro, vowed to tackle the increasing deficit of its fuel price stabilization fund (FEPC). Established in 2007, the FEPC aims to protect Colombian society from fuel price volatility and covers retail price disparities for gasoline and diesel compared to the international market. The implementation of Colombia's 1999 monetary and fiscal, also direct policies, was considered successful in addressing a severe economic crisis and stabilizing inflation. The monetary policy, which including adoption and inflation targeting framework and allowing the exchange rate to float, helped the central bank focus on domestic inflation while providing flexibility in responding to external shocks. High interest rate also curtailed demand-driven inflation, although they initially slowed economic growth. On the fiscal side, structural adjustment, including expenditure controls and fiscal reforms, aim to restore fiscal discipline and reduce public debt. Additionally, international financial support, such as the standby arrangement with the IMF, bolstered confidence in the government's ability to manage the crisis. These coordinated policies successfully reduced inflation and stabilized the economy, although they came with the cost of a recession and social challenges during the adjustment period.
The recommendation to reduce inflation in Colombia is through monetary policy. This means that the central bank should focus on controlling the money supply and stabilizing prices. For example, increasing interest rates that makes borrowing become more expensive and at the same time reducing demand-driven inflation. These measures aim to reduce demand pressures in the economy, aligning them with supply levels to stabilize prices. Coordination with fiscal policies and clear communication of these measures are essential to maintain public confidence and ensuring the effectiveness of monetary policy.
Moving forward in addressing inflation in Colombia, we need focused actions that target both immediate and long-term solutions. One important step is investing in infrastructure. Logistic projects like building roads, bridges, and public transport system will not only create jobs but also stimulate long-term economic growth. Additionally, shifting toward renewable energy sources like wind and solar will help reduce Colombia's reliance on imported energy, stabilize prices, and foster great job creation. Another key approach is boosting agricultural development. Colombia's vulnerability to global food price fluctuation make it essential to increase domestic food production. Supporting small farmers through microfinancing, technology, and training will enhance food security, reduce dependency on imports, and help keep inflation under control. As we look to the future, several trends are expected to shape Colombia's economy. First, we can anticipate inflation stabilizing as monetary policy take full effect. With ongoing fiscal discipline and strategic policy implementation, inflation is expected to fall below 8% by 2025, providing a more stable economic environment. Furthermore, Colombia's economy is likely to become more diversified. The country is expected to increasingly focus on sectors such as technology and renewable energy, reducing its dependence on oil and mining. By 2030, this industry could play a larger role in the economy, promoting long-term growth and resilience.
In my opinion, the government of Colombia should boost their domestic production, particularly in agriculture and manufacturing. This would encourage private investment in these sectors and create productivity. The government can support this by offering incentives such as lower tax or low interest loans to producers and small businesses, allowing efficiency and reducing inflation. Moreover, fostering partnerships between the public and private sectors can accelerate progress in the industries. From here, Colombia can reduce its dependence on imports, stabilize supply, and create a more resilient economy that is better equipped to manage inflation.
As we look to the future, several trends are expected to shape Colombia's economy. First, we can anticipate inflation stabilizing as monetary policy take full effect. With ongoing fiscal discipline and strategic policy implementation, inflation is expected to fall below 8% by 2035, providing a more stable economic environment. Furthermore, Colombia's economy is likely to become more diversified. The country is expected to increasingly focus on sectors such as technology and renewable energy, reducing its dependence on oil and mining. By 2030, this industry could play a larger role in the economy, promoting long-term growth and resilience.
Before I conclude, let me quickly recap the points we've discussed. Inflation is critical economic indicator that reflects the rise in prices over time, impacting purchasing power, trades and overall economic stability. In Colombia, inflation is deeply influenced by its reliance on key industries like oil, agriculture and mining. These sectors, while crucial to the economy, expose the country to external shocks such as fluctuation in global commodity prices and exchange rates. Historically, Colombia has experienced periods of instability such as the hyperinflation of the 90s, but reform and sound policy have helped stabilize the economy. However, challenges persist. The country's dependency on imports for machinery, electronics and foods makes it susceptible to imported inflation, especially when the peso weakens and global prices rise. Currently, inflation in Colombia is shaped by global trends such as rising energy costs and supply chain disruptions. This factor highlights the importance of sustainable policies and diversification of industry to build economic resilience. In conclusion, understand inflation in Colombia requires us to beyond numbers. It's about examining the interplay of history, industry and global markets. Addressing inflation sustainably will require balancing threats, dependencies, managing domestic policies and adapting to external challenges.